Okay, hello everybody. Hello, thanks for coming. I'm going to be talking to you today about a fairly non-technical subject. I'm not going to go into any great technical details regarding security or coding, so it's slightly out of place for this conference, obviously. But first of all, I'll just introduce myself. My name's Campbell Murray. I'm currently, and have been since 2006, Technical Director at a company called Encryption Limited, based in the UK, and we have offices in Europe. I'm also founder and director of a scheme called the Cyber Scheme, which I'll mention a few times throughout the talk. I was formerly a director of Tiger Scheme, which again we'll look at a little bit later. But my primary role, outside of being a penetration tester, outside of being a director, should I say, is that I'm a penetration tester. Is everybody aware of what a penetration tester is? Because if you're not, we will have a look at this, but in the framework of the cyber skills agenda, if you like. I do research when I have the time, which as we get increasingly busy is less and less, unfortunately, these days. But I'm committed to cybersecurity standards and development, which is why I've been involved in Tiger Scheme and why I'm founding director of Cyber Scheme at the moment as well. And that's really what we're here to talk about. A little bit more about me. I'm what's known as a CESG Czech team leader. Now, CESG are part of GCHQ. They're the Central Electronic Security Group. And they impose a standard upon penetration testing in the government framework in what we call protectively marked environments. So where you have material that is government or military owned, which has a stamp on the top, and you've seen them in the films, you know what kind of stamps they have on them. For any kind of pen testing or security assurance within that framework, you have to use a Czech team. And I'm one of the Czech team leaders who are available in the UK. I've been knocking around in commercial information security for about 16 years, and I'm still a pen tester. I still actively go out and pen test, which is quite unusual. Come from what's called a red team background. Now, red teaming were the good old days when organisations would approach us and say, we need a security audit. And an audit in those days wasn't a look at this IP address, assess our website. It was literally, you're the organisation, we're going to audit you. And we spent up to 6 months breaking into buildings, obtaining people's passwords, writing letters, using all sorts of dirty tactics to try and assess really what the security culture of an organisation is. And that whole process was called red teaming. It's been somewhat diluted in recent years as pen testing and security auditing has become more commoditised, and we find the scopes of the work that we do are being reduced down to focusing on individual mobile phone apps, websites, for example. I'm a community mentor. I do a lot of talking around the place. I contribute to UK info security groups such as OWASP and the B-Sides organisations. I also happily mentor anybody who's looking at getting into security to give advice. And I do a lot of talking as well, which is why we'll probably find that I'll be flicking through the slides towards the end of this at a hell of a rate because I'm trying to catch up. What do I do and how do I do it? Well, in a nutshell, I locate and exploit vulnerabilities in anything. We code architectures, that could be operating system architectures, network architectures, could be assembly architectures. We're using the term architecture in its widest sense. I'll examine logical systems, business process flows included in that, and looking for the weaknesses in them. I'll pen test people, a process we call social engineering, whereby we'll try and trick our way into organisations, into buildings, obtain passwords, obtain sensitive information that shouldn't be extracted from companies and other organisations. Physical access systems we'll also look at. We love key fobs, absolutely adore them, because I've got a real interest in radio frequencies. Do a lot of research in radio frequencies. I've also done research into GPS, GSM, recently ADSB, which is the aeroplane tracking system as well. It's quite interesting stuff. And for a 10 quid software-defined radio dongle, you can open up a whole world of really, really interesting stuff. But how do I do it? And here we're talking more about skills. I've got a very well-defined methodology, and in my mentoring process, particularly with the team in my company, they're taught a process of assessing and approaching anything, be it a website, a network architecture, a server build, a code review, a firewall review, of all the myriad of things that we test and look at. The same process applies. And this is where their real skill lies, is being able to adopt and follow through this methodology. It starts off with reconnaissance, completely passively. We can't assess what we've got until we know exactly what's there, which is also the fingerprinting phase, taking everything apart, really understanding how an application works, documenting it in detail, identifying all the assets, all the URLs in a web application, for example. Once we've got that body of knowledge, we'll attempt to identify vulnerabilities. And the way we do that is putting ourselves into the developer's mindset. Now, we're keenly aware that developers will be given a task to do, they will be given a deadline to do it, and an outcome of this code must achieve X. And how you get there can be a matter of personal pride in how tidy your code is. But more often than not, if you're up against a tight and unrealistic project deadline, you're just going to make it work. So we'll look at code and think, if we were in that position, how would we put it together? Where would the injection points be? What would have been left out under that process of duress for development? Once we've identified vulnerabilities, we attempt to exploit them, and if we're successful, we'll hide our tracks, we'll delete logs, we'll create backdoors, we'll clean up after ourselves. And that's the full pentest methodology. That can be applied to absolutely any system, be that a car information system, which I've been doing some research into car systems lately, very interesting stuff. But that is how I go about my day-to-day business. So regardless of whatever you bring to me to say, Campbell, assess the security of this is a methodology which we undertake. Kind of things I typically find are very common. Now, as I said before, I've been in this industry a long time. I've performed, I don't know how many thousands of pen tests. I wouldn't like to guess. I really wouldn't. We constantly find the same things. Crosssite scripting, cross-site request forgery, SQL injection, particularly in Android applications. We're finding lots of SQL injection in Android apps at the moment. Debugging features left on, for example. Debugging functions we love, because we can always extract more information in our reconnaissance phase, learning about the application. General misconfigurations, escalation of privilege vulnerabilities, logging in as a standard user and finding a way to escalate our privileges to a higher level user is a common problem. A myriad of issues may surround that exploitation path, be they session weaknesses and a variety of other things. It's all very interesting stuff. But what we're going to talk about today is cyber, what it is. It's a word that's being used very, very frequently in the news and the media lately. We're going to talk about where the cyber industry is at the moment, what the current state of affairs is. How would you become a cyber professional? What is a cyber professional in the current industry understanding and current industry requirements? Some certification options we'll have a look at, some of the options that are available to you in the UK. And we're going to have a look at the future and some, honestly, from my point of view, some truths about what we're doing wrong. So what is cyber, exactly? It's a term that cropped up about 2 years ago in the media. It's used daily. If you grab your Twitter feed now and just search for cyber, it will return thousands upon thousands of people tweeting the word cyber. Historically, as information security professionals, we've always restricted ourselves to the use of 3 key phrases, which are threat, risk, and vulnerability. And we have very clearly defined definitions of what those mean and how they're applied. Unfortunately, now, the media have applied this magic woo word, cyber, over everything. It's partly media, largely media. It's not helped by sales, and that's the information security industry issue. They sell using FUD. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And if you hang around with any InfoSec pros at all, you'll hear that coming up a lot. FUD. This is FUD. That is FUD. Cyber is a word that's used to just describe everything electronic. And not everybody really thinks an awful lot of the term. It's used jokingly in information security. This is a mate of mine, and I picked this tweet up off him this morning. Just grabbed it, screen capped it, chucked it in the talk. But it is beginning to serve a general purpose. And that when we use the term cyber, although it has no real definition, we understand that we're talking about largely electronic things in a security context. So the media and the salespeople have achieved their goal, and it is increasingly being adopted by information security industry. I'm a founder of a scheme called the Cyber Scheme, after all. It was a bitter pill to swallow, I have to tell you that. Designed by committee for the name, but there we go. Where is the industry right now? It's an extraordinarily healthy state if you're a pen tester, or if we're not familiar with the term CERT, Computer Emergency Response Team. So in the event of an intrusion, you call out a CERT, and they'll come and do a forensic lockdown, they'll analyse malware, that's the purpose of a CERT team. There are two sides to information security and the cyber industry at the moment. There's offensive, which is security assessment, trying to get in. Seeing what the hackers, the malicious individuals, what the threats out there can see, and what can they leverage and utilise. And then you've got the blue team, the other side to my red team approach. The blue team are the defensive guys. They're trying to identify attacks, block them, but their role is also to clean up and analyse following an intrusion and try and find out, how did this happen? How do we stop it happening again? It's helped with legislation. Now, I've made this talk UK specific, so I will be talking about UK legislation. We have two key areas of legislation in the UK at the moment, which are driving particularly the penetration testing industry, but also the CERT industry, the incident responders. And they are the PSN and GSI COCOs. Now, those are the public sector network and the government secure intranet, code of connection requirements. If you are a government body, if you are NHS, if you are police, if you are funded by public money in any way, shape or form, and you wish to transfer data that is protectively marked official, anywhere within internally or across any government boundaries to other agencies, and scenarios you can think of would be social workers requiring the ability to send sensitive information to police officers electronically and securely. That's all handled by the public sector network. And inside that network, a very small part of it is the government secure intranet. To connect to that, if you're a local authority, NHS body, whoever, you have to satisfy a code of connection. And you have to satisfy this every year to maintain your connection to the PSN. Ironically, if you don't have connection to the PSN, you can't function as a government body. So they are spending a lot of money on pen testing and consultancy, ensuring that their systems meet the set standard of, spelled out in the code of connection. And it's driven a lot of effort in the industry in the UK. It's increased standards. I mentioned the CSG check scheme. A lot of this work is determined, because it's protectively marked, it has to be done by people within that scheme, which I think are currently 38 companies. In terms of check team leaders, it's always a bit, you never really know how many there are, but if I pull my finger and stuck it in the air, I'd say there's about 130 of us. It's 130 check team leaders, maybe 200 check team members who assist team leaders doing 90% of government work. The industry is very healthy from my point of view. I'm quite happy with it. From a purely commercial, I'm getting out there, we're doing lots of work. Great. Cyber Essentials scheme is something that launched on the 5th of June. And here this is breaking out away from those protectively marked areas and dealing more with commercials and other areas of industry. Now, the scheme is optional at the moment. However, the original GCSX COCO was optional, and the way government like to do things is make it optional, and then sometime down the line this is going to become a requirement if you want access to X, Y, Z. The Cyber Essentials scheme sets up and publishes a set of standards by which all organisations should adhere to. They're fairly basic. It's nowhere near ISO 27001 standards. It's nowhere near as onerous as that. It's probably easier to get than PCI DSS, to be honest. However, the Cyber Essentials Plus badge requires independent tests. So it's a pen test. Again, there's history repeating itself. We're doing the same thing. We've got this whole industry set up to pen test against a standard. We've got PCI DSS, which is a vulnerability assessment against a standard. The PSN code of connection, pen test against a standard. Cyber Essentials, that's going to be adopted by small businesses, SMEs, definition of which being turnover up to 50 million. So actually quite large companies, really. But that will slowly seep through, And the UK government are doing their part in trying to lock down, trying to improve standards across the board. But is it really good for security? This is the question. Some numbers, because no talk is complete without some statistics. Reports of 50,000 attacks per day against the UK from a wide variety of sources, a wide geographic dispersion. These are targeted attacks against businesses. If you consider the risk to the United Kingdom as a whole, there are approximately 100,000 businesses that are trading solely online. That's 100,000 e-commerce websites that are active, making money. They are the lifeblood of that industry. Those 100,000 businesses are possibly employing, let's say, 10 people each. That's 1 million people. Significant numbers. If I had nation-state capability, BGP routing, and various other nice network technologies, I could wipe out 100,000 websites pretty quickly, if I had the bandwidth. If I found a vulnerability in a domain registrar, somebody popular in the UK, like 123reg, Fast Hosts, UK Fast, one of the big ones, who have domain names for the cheap domain name sellers. You buy a domain name for a fiver. You want to start your online business, you need a domain name. You go to one of the big guys, you give them your credit card details, they host your DNS. If I can attack the DNS of these large ISPs, I can wipe out 100,000 online businesses. The effect against the UK of that kind of economic disruption would be catastrophic. It really would. And the UK government are well aware of that. So they are trying to fill this cyber skills gap. However, regardless of pen test activities, vulnerabilities are found every day. On the train on the way down here, when I was writing this talk, I did a quick search on CVE, MITRE website. Now, CVE stands for Common Vulnerability and Exposure. It's a mechanism by which we use to rate, catalogue vulnerabilities. If you think about the virus industry, malware industry, depending on whose antivirus vendor you use, you could have got the blaster worm, or you could have got the NoFOS worm, or you could have got, what's the other one? It's called DepMod 32. All effectively the same thing, but all the antivirus vendors calling it something different, unfortunately. So it's a bit of a mixed industry. In terms of actual vulnerability, we do have a system by which we categorize vulnerabilities, so we all know what we're talking about. However we describe it, however we explain, you haven't patched this, you are vulnerable to an SMB escalation exploit. If we reference the CVE, we've got a fixed point that everybody can adhere to. So I did a quick search for June 2014, 3,892 results for June 2014. What are we on, the 12th? It's probably a slow month, to be honest. If I'm perfectly honest, this is quite a slow month. I used to do a talk around universities where at the start of the day, start of the talk, I'd do a quick search on Twitter for CVE releases, and I'd set a counter to 0. By the end of a 30-minute talk, I'd hold it up and say, in 30 minutes, this is how many. And usually it was about 300-400. It put it in a 30 to 60-minute talk. It's quite astonishing how many vulnerabilities get released and catalogued. And these are the ones that are being reported. These are not the ones that are all being discovered. And that was at 8 o'clock this morning. So we're going to take a little look at some that have come out recently. I'm a bit of a Twitter nut. TweetDeck, Twitter client, was a couple of days ago found to be vulnerable to a Crosssite scripting attack. The emoji on the end, the heart, is what broke the string and allowed the execution or the implantment of the JavaScript code. This was known in 2011, and the developers patched it by scripting around a whitelist of what they would expect. Their defenses were entirely based on what do we expect the user to provide. It's our client platform on the mobile phone. We know what's going out through there. Now, of course, we can proxy things, we can modify things, we can do whatever we want. But this ended up being a client-side attack because anybody using TweetDeck receiving JavaScript with that emoji on the end broke the local client defense and executed the JavaScript because it terminated the string, it terminated the process flow of the application's defense. And just went, that's enough, I'm not doing any more, what have I got? Bang. 40,000 odd retweets of one person's particular tweet, which was a very rude word, which I won't say. But generally people were just having fun with it once they'd worked out how to exploit it. Twitter got flooded with JavaScript. Because it's cross-site scripting, which I won't go into too much detail about, and explaining the concepts behind it. If you look at the CVE and the CVSS scoring system, a CVSS is a system used to rate vulnerabilities and how severe they are, what the likelihood is, what the impact is. Cross-site scripting typically, historically, has come in at about 7.4, which is high. In my point of view, as a penetration tester, I consider cross-site scripting to be critical. And I did a talk at DevOps in Belgium a few years ago just on cross-site scripting to try and highlight what we could really do with it. In this case, if there's also a cross-site request forgery flaw in the Twitter app, then you're into a whole different world of vulnerability pain. And again, cross-site request forgery doesn't rate too high on the CVSS score. Put them together, and you get jokers doing stuff like this. The emoji again to break the protection execution flow. The script being executed contains, rather jokingly, it never work, of course, because it's an alert, rm-rf, home directory, everything. Wipe your home directory. Of course, they wouldn't actually execute. This guy's called Josh. I happen to know him vaguely, and he's a bit of a joker, but I thought it was a nice explanation of how cross-site request forgery could work. Because you could simply, where you have the cross-site scripting flaw, and you can execute JavaScript in the client context, then we can also execute any command that JavaScript can access within that client context, including retweeting, posting tweets, for example. And that's what we call cross-site request forgery. This one made me laugh. This was found by a friend of mine who works at another company called Portcullis. He downloaded Handsome Web SOS web pages and, yeah, I know, started fuzzing it. He was actually with a friend of his who was trying to explain what he does as a penetration tester. So they said, pick some software, we'll download it, we'll have a look. They found this in 5 minutes. This is fuzzing. We'll just tamper with this string, we'll put in something random, probably an MD5, we'll put in something that looks like that, see what happens. First thing that came back was the actual password. It's incredible, it really is. Now, addressing cyber skills and addressing cyber, as we are begrudgingly calling it now, is a real uphill battle, as you can see. With thousands of vulnerabilities being identified every month, there's only so many pen testers out there. But there are an awful lot more developers producing code, publishing apps and websites and open source projects and closed source projects than there are or ever will be pen testers. So we have a gap. And this is what I refer to when talking about the cyber skills gap. This is one I found. This again was in a client app. I was very popular for about 5 minutes with 1.8 billion followers. Again, now, I won't say who because I have disclosed the vulnerability to, it may have caused a bit of a problem with Twitter for a little while, so I do apologise about that. But I have disclosed to the vendor of that particular operating system, mobile operating system and client, what we did, and they have pushed an update. But clearly we have a problem. And it's due to the cyber skills gap. Are we addressing the gap? As I said before, I was founder director of Tiger Scheme. The Tiger Scheme, Tiger teaming is where the name for that came from. A Tiger team is similar to a red team. Where in a red team you had purely penetration testers, offensive security people who come quite happily bash a door in with a sledgehammer. We didn't care. It was the 90s. We got away with so much. We can't often get to do that these days, but a Tiger team was a striped team. So you would have red teamers, you'd have pure offensive professionals, but you'd also have defensive knowledge, you'd also have some sort of project management in there as well, not that anyone ever listened to them. But trying to address that gap, the Tiger Scheme was founded in 2007, has been providing training courses and certifications suitable for government and industry since then. Okay? The Cyber Scheme has a wider remit. We will talk a little bit about them later. But are we addressing the gap? Clearly not. But how do you become cyber? Obviously you're here because you're interested in the concept of cyber, you're interested in the concept of security. So it wouldn't be too big a leap of imagination to assume that some of you might be interested in how you get there and what the options are. I think we've covered that really if you want to go into offensive information security, your options are Cert for forensics or penetration testing. That's really pretty well it. Historically, the focus has always been pen testing and Cert. D Fear is another term as well, digital forensic investigation responders. So in the event of a malware hit, or even an employee, suspects an employee, Edward Snowden's been in your office and he's pulled all your sensitive files, they're particularly focused on analysing volatile memory, gathering evidence, finding the step chain of how they got there and exactly what happened. So have a look at a few of the offerings that are available to you now. There's an organisation called CREST, which stands for the Council of Registered Ethical Security Testers. They, again, are CESG approved. Their exams are recognised by CESG and GCHQ. So if you wanted to go and join a check team, like my company is, then if you got this exam, you could apply, and provided CESG are happy with you, then you could become a check member or leader. They do pen test and cert, and there's no training available. As far as I'm aware, I have found no training. I did find a 7-safe course which alluded to having something to do with it, but it wasn't really clear, so I didn't include it. Please, if any check CREST people are around, don't lynch me after. I did my best to find out. Tiger Scheme I've mentioned before. Again, they're also CESG approved. Very, very much government focused, the offerings so far. CESG approved. Pen test exams up to team leader, forensic exams up to CIR. Incidentally, they also do a really nice little course on how you purchase a pen test and how you manage a pen test team, which is actually a really good course. It's quite nice. They have some training available. They had a lot more, and then they have recently become more academic. They're being run by universities, and they're now ramping up their training offerings again. So they're becoming, there are more courses available in more locations and will increase over time. Cyber Scheme I've mentioned, CESG approved, government space again. Early days, only formed December 2013, already offering CESG approved pen testing. We are developing courses in secure web app development, secure coding. We're also looking at a much more layered approach. You probably get a feel that pen testing is pretty much, so far, really where the training's at. Becoming a pen tester from a university graduate, you're either lucky enough to get an internship or a junior position in a company like mine, and you get trained and mentored over a period of years and exposed to different techniques, different approaches, different attitudes. Or you come from a development background or a networking background, and you have the aptitude and you put yourself through the exams, and it's a long, hard slog, and there's no guarantee of a job at the end. So actually becoming a pen tester is not the easiest thing in the world to do. ISC2, which is actually ISC, but they like to refer to themselves as ISC squared because it's cool. A lot of their exams are based on auditing. Now, I am a CISSP. I have been for many, many years. The reason I qualified as a CISSP is because a number of government tenders required it. That's it. No other reason for sitting the exam. They do some other, CISSP of course stands for Certified Information Systems Security Professional. They also do a Software Lifecycle Professional exam, which was quite intriguing and looked really quite exciting and relevant for developers. And it is, but it's about the security development lifecycle. It doesn't teach secure coding. It doesn't teach what are the attacks coming at you. It gives a format similar to another large company's offering, which we'll come on to in a minute. They do a Certified Cyber Forensics Professional, which is mostly technical, but again, largely theoretical. When I started the CISSP, it was about 2003, I went to a university in North London somewhere, and I sat in a room for 7 hours and filled in a multiple choice. Great. So I'm apparently a world evangelist and leader in information security because I passed that multiple choice. It kind of rubs with me that a little bit, but never mind. They do some healthcare-specific exams as well, but in terms of they don't provide training, but there is training available from third parties. You can go and sit a CISSP boot camp, for example, and go for 5 days and spend 12 hours a day having information poured into your head about the 10 domains of security and trying to brainwash you into thinking in a particular way. Now, SANS, you may have heard of. They're quite popular. They have got lots and lots and lots of courses. And I found one. I actually found a course that could be relevant to the people in this room. They actually do a secure coding in Java, JEE, developing defensible applications. The syllabus of it actually looks quite good. I'm not a Java coder, by any means, but I was actually quite intrigued with that. Microsoft, of course, they're a bit of a name in information technology. They tend to run fundamentals courses. Really. They have some product-specific, how to harden SharePoint, how to harden Windows Server 2012, but nothing really in-depth or generic. And of course, they have their software development lifecycle, which is more about project management than it is about security. Offensive security, all online training, very in-depth, very offensive style approach. The OSCP and OSCEs are all-encompassing in a number of key skills, such as assembly language, shell coding, vulnerability identification, exploitation, maintaining access, creating SOX proxies over reverse TCP bind shells, things like that. It's a very technical course. If you want to learn Linux and routing, this is the course for you, because you will know Linux and routing by the end of that. The OSCE takes it even further, and the OSCE is literally just focusing down on identifying and developing exploits. Very pen test, very offensive focused. Those who do the wireless course, they have others that's not exhaustive, but it's all done online. It's all very, very cost effective. It's very good value for money training. But I'm going to stop there. There are others, because I think I've outlined the point that there's a really clear theme. Cyber skills are focused on penetration and evidence gathering following a penetration. How is that helping exactly? There are more developers and apps being produced every single day than there will ever be skilled pen testers able to verify that they're secure before they go to market. The cyber skills gap is being dealt with by a very historical approach. We need more pen testers. That will close the gap. We need more forensic analysts. That will close the gap. That's never going to close the gap, ever. Let's just flip it around. And I'll try to look at things, for this talk, I'll try to look at things from your point of view. Also, I've been a pen tester forever. It's all I've ever known. And it's a mindset, it's an approach, it's a whatever the system is, find out what it is, create an exploded diagram, insert spanner, see if it stops working. If it stops working, great, what can I do with that? So I thought, no, okay, I'm going to develop something. I'm going to try and develop a Java app. I did honestly try really hard. So I looked around for some tutorials. And I settled on Swing, Derby, Database, and NetBeans because it was easy and no other reason. And there were a lot of tutorials on how to get started, how to start building GUI apps, how to make them cross-platform, and all the rest of it. So I designed an app. I'm a field archer in my spare time, and field archery has a number of variables in it. We don't shoot set distances. We don't shoot clear courses. We don't shoot the same type of target every shot. It's not like Olympic archery where you have a standard target, you're always at the same distance, and it's dead flat. We might be shooting through trees, uphill, downhill, window shots, dead ground. There's loads of variables. I'd like to try and improve my archery. I'm going to build an app that's going to collect data on every shot and then analyze it and show me, are there any correlations in weaknesses? So I thought, I'll do it in Java. Great project for this. I'm quite good with databases. I'm not bad with software design. I tend to code in Ruby. I know, no one's swearing at me, that's good. I do a lot of coding in Ruby, but because of a lot of the tools we use are written in Ruby, so I'm quite familiar with it. That's what it looked like. Don't laugh. It was my first attempt at a Java Swing GUI, but I couldn't complete it. I simply couldn't complete it. The tutorials that I found were really basic, and it was the typical jumping up a couple of steps and slipping back down one. You learn how to do a certain amount of stuff, and then you want to do something else, you find a tutorial that doesn't work, you have to debug that before you can move forward. Now, I deliberately didn't apply my existing knowledge of object-oriented programming into this to solve problems. I wanted to approach it as a complete noob. I know nothing about this. I've never programmed anything in my life. I'm going to rely entirely on online tutorials. And those tutorials, while going through this process, were quite revealing. They were very basic. But I couldn't find anything about data protection. The app that I wanted to build would have multiple users. So lots of people could use the same app. So you had a family, they could load it up on their desktop at the end of a day shooting and all put in their scores. Yeah. Couldn't find anything about session management. Couldn't find anything about security. I searched online for how to write secure Java code, and you know what I found? The top result, the very top result comes back in Google, was written in 1998. That's not the only result. There were more recent ones. But that's the top result. The most relevant result as far as the world's biggest search engine and all of their very cleverly designed algorithms could determine, that was the best fit. 1998. I was really quite surprised at that. It was a research exercise. I saved all the tutorials, saved all the HTML. I even bought an ebook. Whatever you think of it, Sam's Learn Java in 24 Hours. It was quite good, I thought, for somebody who doesn't know Java. I created a regular expression to troll through my folder of everything. I converted the PDF to text using a Linux utility, and I found the word secure referenced twice. Throughout all of that, dozens of tutorials, dozens of web pages, dozens of files, hundreds of thousands of words of text, and I find the word secure used twice in the ebook, and neither of those occurrences were actually referring to information security. They were phrases such as, when you secure a job. And that's where I found them. There was no reference whatsoever in any of this. So could I be a GUI developer? Could I be a professional GUI developer? Possibly. A bit more practice, a bit more blood and sweat. I could possibly even develop something half decent, sell it on an app store. How good is it going to be? Really, how good is it actually going to be? This is identifying, from my point of view, what the cybersecurity skills gap really is. When we talk about the skills gap, it's almost exclusively talking about having enough pen testers, having enough forensic responders. There is no mention of having enough knowledgeable coders producing robust applications for mobile phones, for the Internet of Things. And yes, we do need more pen testers, because there's more pen testing work. If you do want to move into pen testing, now is a great time. There are highly lucrative positions out there, and you can get some really good advice from people on how to take your skills now, develop them and transfer them, and adopt the approach of a pen tester. It's an interesting life, lots of travel, which is not good for everyone. After over 16 years of doing this, I'm getting a bit fed up with it, to be honest. Lots of lucrative jobs, lots of great opportunities out there, lots of jetting around the world. I work all over the world. It's fantastic. There are more incident responders needed. Lots more, because of just this month alone, nearly 4,000 new vulnerabilities. They will have been exploited in the wild, as we refer to it, long before anybody reported them. And that was just a researcher who, like my friend from Portcullis, who downloaded the SOS software and went, let's have a look at it. If he hadn't elected to do that in his free time, that massive vulnerability would still be out there. It's purely by chance. There is a huge gap in what we actually need. But adding more pen testers and researchers are only going to fulfill the need of industry at the moment to address compliance and the ever-creeping legislation that thou shalt have a pen test, thou shalt have a PCI DSS audit, because somewhere in your organization, goodness me, you take payment. So more people on the ground finding vulnerabilities is a very good thing, but it's a treadmill. It's a real uphill struggle. We can never outdo the number of people who will find the same tutorials I did, take it a bit further and actually publish that app for people to use. What if it had got really popular, my app, my shoddy little app, my very first go at software? Yes, I understand databases, I understand linear regression calculations, I can do statistics. That was the point behind building that app. It was a bit of a challenge. How do I get the numbers in? How do I get them out? How do I make something meaningful out of them? It could have been very popular. May well do. I might finish it, or I might give it to one of you guys. You know a lot more about it than I do. Excuse me. But all of those new apps, if I had published that, it would be riddled with vulnerabilities. If I'd made it into a website and I'd done a PHP tutorial, it would be riddled with vulnerabilities. And I'm just adding. I challenged a 14-year-old to learn Java Swing. In 6 hours of following the tutorials, they had built a scientific calculator. It's going to show I'm really showing my age. Or they're just a damn sight cleverer than I am, I'm not sure which. But a fully functioning scientific calculator that they built from a couple of tutorials that they found online, hacked it about, modified it. Okay, admittedly, this 14-year-old is an accomplished Python programmer already, but took the same approach. I know nothing about this. I've never used an IDE. 6 hours effort. And that could be up online. I bet that's absolutely full of problems. There we go. So the question is, why aren't we building securely in the first place? Well, there are a number of reasons. Budget, competitiveness. If your organization needs to approach your clients and say, we will build you this app, and you've got 3 other people saying the same thing, who are they going to go with? They're going to go with who's going to get it out quicker, who's going to make it look prettier, who's going to fulfill the application flow most appropriately and closest to the client's designs and expectations. The clients aren't asking for security. You're not thinking about it, particularly, because you've just got to get the application out. And then once they're out there, really nice people like me get hold of them, rifle through your code, go, dong, insert spanner, oh, we've got a privilege escalation, post a CVE. It's a losing battle. It's not a sustainable way to address the cybersecurity needs. And the threat surface is growing all the time. I mentioned the Internet of Things. This is a term that came about, I think, probably end of last year, probably, when I first heard it. Everything will be connected. Already, I really worried about using phones, as it is, because I know what I can do with them. I've done lots of research. I do a lot of research into cars. If you drive a BMW, think twice about having a confidential conversation on your hands-free kit. Because your internal microphone that's built into every new BMW is broadcasting everything you say at a frequency of 24 megahertz. And if I've got a big enough receiver and I'm driving along beside you, just listen to everything. There's no confidentiality. Design flaw. It's not the first one I found in BMW, and they have been informed of it. The software in your cars, probably largely built on Java. I have a group of friends who entertain themselves making cars do strange things and blink up different messages. So they repurpose the software so they hit 70 miles an hour, or 88 miles per hour in one case, and the dashboard flashes up the message, when this hits 88 miles an hour, you're going to see some, which of course is a reference to the film Back to the Future. These things are so vulnerable, it's ridiculous, but they're purposed to work, and then they're shipped. Pretty much. They satisfy UAT, they're shipped. Off they go. We've got SCADA coming into our homes. If you don't know what SCADA is, these are industrial control systems. Now, typically they're used for waterworks, for gas mains, for things like that. But SCADA's coming in with smart meters into your house. I could drive down your street once everybody's had their smart meters put in on their gas and quadruple your bills just by repurposing the Wi-Fi signals, the GSM signals that those units are using, broadcasting your current meter reading to your energy suppliers. Well, I just broadcast a stronger one. Great. It's really scary stuff. I get you shut off. If I know you go away for holiday, why don't I just turn up outside your house with some Wi-Fi RF tools and tricks and things and have your gas, water and electricity turned off just in time for you to get home. Yeah, nice. There's no reason why we can't do that. So we've got a few minutes left. I'm just going to summarize what we've said. That there is far too much focus on penetration testing skills. That's never going to fill the cybersecurity gap. But those skills are really useful to have. even if you're a developer, if you've got no intention of ever becoming a pen tester, understanding some of the tools, the methodologies, the approaches that we have, so that you can understand the attacks that we're looking for, will hopefully change the way you write your code. If you understand how serious cross-site scripting could be, you would really build in, unlike TweetDeck, some robust protection against it. You wouldn't just patch a vulnerability from 2011 with a couple of extra lines of code. You'd really think about it. As I said, pen testing is fighting a losing battle. There's just not enough of us. There never will be. We also have problems with disclosure, which puts a lot of people off. At the moment, there's some legislation going through which may stop me from revealing any security research I do forevermore, because I could be prosecuted. I could actually face 30 years in prison for performing security research. If you find a bug in Apple, do keep it to yourself, because if you let them know, the first response you're going to get is a letter from their solicitors. Doesn't exactly make us want to submit our bugs to Apple, for example. There are real problems. There are real issues with the industry. What I've seen, there's no real training for developers. There's nothing really solid on this is how we write secure code. If you've ever been in the Ministry of Defense and you end up as a developer, they can write secure code. But it wouldn't be if you're a creative developer, you wouldn't enjoy it. The way they go about things is quite different. How will you fill the gap? Bearing in mind, you're the guys creating the apps, the websites, the Twitter clients. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. But if you understand the risks and attacks, and you learn about them, you learn about my methodology and how I go about breaking your stuff, it will hopefully change the way you think about writing code. Learn to code defensively. Accept security bug submissions, thankfully. Not, right, that's it, we're going to sue you. Because at the moment, as I said, there's legislation going through that could just completely kill security research. That's not going to stop people exploiting apps. That's just going to stop good people from telling you about them so you can fix them. Evangelize if you can. And please share your knowledge. Like I said, the top Google result for how do you code securely in Java from 1998. If everybody here took their collective knowledge and expertise in coding defensively and wrote how-tos and updated wikis and mentored and contributed to the upcoming developers, then hopefully, possibly, that skills gap could be closed a little bit and we can stem the flow of exploitation. So, we've got 3 minutes and we have a question straight away.
What about the new technologies about, new type of firewalls, like the web application firewall that will try to, get your penetration testing knowledge and try to automate it?
Yes. Intrusion detection and prevention systems, web application firewalls is the question I've just been asked. Will they develop? Will they provide a layer of protection so that we don't have to worry so much about the code? I'll just describe very quickly to you something known as the Beavis and Butthead attack, which was developed by a good friend of mine, Aaron. He's an intrusion prevention system researcher. The biggest, shiniest, most expensive IPS system went to a conference, and the salespeople quite confidently said, this will defend against APT. Not a term I've used yet, don't have time, another one I don't like. And effectively defend against all unknown cyber attacks. So being a researcher and an internationally known expert in the field, he said, right, come on then. He used a virus, a bit of malware called Beavis, ran it through the IPS. IPS quite rightly went, I know what you are, you're not coming through. So you know what he did? He recompiled the code and called it Butthead. And it went straight through the IPS, didn't see it. And that was the most advanced intrusion protection system you could buy at the time. We will always find a way around it. It's the short of it. Any other questions? Hey.
Do you use a Metasploit framework?
Oh, I do. I contribute to Metasploit framework as well. I write modules for it. It's partly why I develop in Ruby as well. It is one of my favorite tools of all time. If you're not familiar with Metasploit, there is a community version of it that's available. It's completely open source. download it. It is Ruby, yes I know. Download it, get it working, have a look at what it can do. The thing is incredible. Not only will it decompile your executables and find pop return addresses and jump addresses and just provide them to me right there on the screen in a matter of seconds for me to start writing shell code, it will also perform 90% of an actual automated penetration test as well. It is a phenomenal piece of kit. Yeah. So we're into the last minute. Does anybody else have any questions at all? Hello.
How do you learn more about developing security for mobile apps, iOS and Android?
Well, this is part of the problem. Learning to code securely for them is an issue. I couldn't advise you. I can advise you on what I find when looking at particularly Android apps, but how you would actually go about developing those securely is adopting security principles. And again, I didn't want to turn this into a training session, but some of the key principles that you should look for are DDPRR. Deter, detect, protect, react, and recover. Can you deter an attack? Using firewalls is a good way. Can you detect an attack? Are you protecting against it? How do you react, or how does the app react when it discovers an attack, and how do you recover from that? What do you do? Typically, if it's C code, we would exit gracefully and say, error condition, not within my scope, don't like that, and off. But in terms of actually learning how to code securely, I'm kind of looking at you guys to possibly address and close and become the people who fill the cybersecurity skills gap. I think I'm out of time now. Thank you very much.